This is the Comedy Room where we talk about sitcoms and the people behind them. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the year 1991, and our comedy legend in the spotlight is Victoria Wood. So let's get started with 1991. And Verso, you're going to run through what sort of happened outside of comedy in this year, aren't you?
I am indeed. Hello, all. Welcome to the episode. 1991 in TV. The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made its UK debut, along with Prime Suspect and The Darling Buds of May, whilst glamour soap Dallas aired its final season. In the world of film, the top 5 box office smashes were Terminator 2, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, Home Alone, Silence of the Lambs, and City Slickers. In sport, we saw the first ever Women's Football World Cup, with USA beating Norway 2-1 in the final. And the world of music, the best-selling singles of the year included Bryan Adams with Everything I Do, Cher, the Shoop Shoop song, Chesney Hawkes, The One and Only, and from The Simpsons, Do the Bartman.
That was a classic at the end there.
Yes, when The Simpsons was funny.
I'm inclined to agree. So, the sitcoms that we were watching, the first one, 2.4 Children, not a show I know masses about. Do you know much about that one?
I dipped in and out of it. I think I watched the first sort of series, and then the rest of them. I dipped in and out, but I did love Gary Olson, who sadly passed away 20 years now. He was fantastic in anything he'd done, comedy, drama, and I think who else? Julia Hills was great in it, and Sandra Dickinson and Roger Lloyd Patel, Trigger, popped in and out, but it's not one I could sit down and tell you chronologically what happened. It was just one of those ones that was on, and the ones I watched was quite funny.
It's one I need to have a look at, really, because it's, as we've sort of alluded to in previous episodes, with a lot of BBC comedy kind of getting attention and stuff, you either find that you can get hold of episodes really easily, and it's on DVD and it's on repeats on the TV and stuff, and it's on catch up a lot, so it's either on BritBox or iPlayer or both. But 2.4 Children seems to have kind of avoided that attention, which is a bit of a shame, really. But it's definitely one to kind of keep an eye out for, I think, to kind of give a bit of a spotlight to something that was very much of its time but got forgotten. The next one is The British Empire. Now, this was a show I really got into. This was Chris Barry doing something that wasn't Red Dwarf. He was the insufferable Gordon Brittas, leisure centre manager. I would say extraordinaire, but he wasn't really. It was very much, there were two characters, Tim and Laura, that were very much the ones that knew what was going on. And he would just sort of fly in and make a lot of noise, but didn't really know a great deal of what was going on and was quite clueless. But I loved that show. What were your thoughts on it?
Honestly, detested it. I just didn't like the character, and if you don't resonate with the character, if you don't like the character, it's pointless watching the show. So I don't think I even watched one episode. Sorry.
Boo. This is where we end the show forever. Yeah, as I was a huge fan of the show, but I think a lot of it was I got into Red Dwarf sort of early 90s, and of course Chris Barry was consistent through both, and I think it was just a case of it was similar humor, very similar to sort of like The Office, but obviously a lot earlier, with the idea of someone who thinks they know sort of everything that's going on, and everyone thinks they're great, and that's not quite the case. But next show, Second Thoughts. This was an ITV comedy, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. London Weekend or Thames, one of the two.
James Bolam and Linda Bellingham, I believe.
Yes, and wasn't Julia Swahalia in it?
As the daughter, yes.
Faith.
Yes. It was LWT as I remember. But it was, I think they actually had the spin-off. Was it Faith in the Future?
That's right, yes.
I used to watch that as well. That was later. So that was when I was really sort of watching anything sort of sitcom based. That was more mid-90s.
Wasn't the serial killer from Hollyoaks in that? Silas, played by Jeff Rule.
Yes.
He was in Drop the Dead Donkey as well.
Yeah. Faith in the Future was also a very early acting role for Simon Pegg.
Oh, was he?
Yeah. So if anyone ever fancies seeing an early Simon Pegg role, the mid-90s sitcom Faith in the Future is one to take a look at. But I remember watching bits of Second Thoughts, but not masses of it. I was 10 in 1991, so a lot of my TV viewing was still sort of along the sort of lines of what my parents were watching. The next show is Murder Most Horrid. And that's not one that I watched a huge amount of because I don't think it was really sort of the kind of humor I'd have got at that age. But you've seen more of it than me, haven't you?
Yes, I watched, again, not chronologically or anything like that. It was one I dipped in and out, but I do. Yeah, for me, it was one of Dawn French's better shows. Far better than the Dibley. I mean, Dibley seems to be everyone's favourite, but this Murder Most Horrid was tucked away on BBC Two. And by the time it was on, I was old enough to have my own TV, so I was allowed to watch BBC Two, so I did. And I again dipped in and out because I was sort of early 20s, so I was out more than I was in. But when I was in, I watched it, and if I remember rightly, it's such a cast of guest stars. I mean, you one of your favourites, Driscoll, Robin Driscoll.
Yes,
he was in an episode. We had Ray Winston. He was in it. Jane Asher. And again, Roger Lloyd Pack, who pops up in everything. He was in an episode. So the guest list I remember the guests more than I do some of the storylines, which is probably not when we're talking about great comedies. I remember the guest stars, but not the storylines. But Stephen Moffat was involved. Anthony Horowitz was involved. I think it was actually started by Ian Hislop. So you can tell it's got dark humour all the way through it.
Yeah, because Ian Hislop's sort of known more for his political stuff, isn't he? Or Have I Got News for You and Private Eye and stuff like that. He's sort of known for that sort of stuff. But he has got quite a dark sense of humour when it comes to his sort of work, hasn't he?
Yes. Many say that it was more of a drama than a comedy, but BBC put it on their websites as part of their comedy, so it's comedy.
Yeah. One of the I'd say one of the defining sort of sitcoms of the 90s. I think this is sort of where we differ a little bit. Bottom. So Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson. There isn't a huge amount of intro that you need to do to this. Is basically Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson two sort of down and outs, flatmates in London. They have one thing on the mind. In Eddie's case, it's sort of two things on the mind, the other being alcohol. And there's a lot of sort of slapstick violence, and it's all very familiar territory to fans of the young ones. But it's sort of like an evolution of that sort of humor. I absolutely adored Bottom, but I didn't get into it at the time. I got into it in retrospect a couple of years later throughout the later series. I think the first one I ever saw was the one where it's Richie's birthday. And Eddie wraps up things like the TV remote and his toothbrush as his presents. But it's something that I can watch over and over and over again. But you're not a massive fan, are you?
Well, I think we might have to dub this episode as Verso Miserable. But it's one of those that I watched, but in my head, it was still quite fresh from the young ones. So I was doing that comparing thing, and I was comparing it to the young ones rather than treating it as its own entity. And to me, it wasn't as good as the young ones. But it was still funny in places, and it's been repeated many a time. I think it's one of the BBC's big cash cows, isn't it? I think it does well for them all over the place.
Yeah, and the thing with Bottom is it was, well, certainly on my sort of from my point of view, was sort of my introduction to the world of Rick Mayall and all that entails. So I ended up watching the young ones as an adult because obviously I was still very, very young when the young ones was on. In fact, I might not even have been born when it started. But there's a lot of people who sort of pop up from things like the young ones and things like that. So the main one being Christopher Ryan, who plays a character called Dave Hedgehog. He obviously was in the young ones, and there's all the spin-offs and various sort of bits and pieces. So they did some live shows, and also the Guest House Paradiso film. So there were 5 sort of live tour videos as they were, but DVDs obviously since, and also the Guest House Paradiso film, which was a spin-off from the 3rd show, which was called Hooligans Island. That was filmed in Bristol, 1997, I believe. And then Guest House Paradiso was released at the end of 1999. But that is the shows of 1991. I believe you have the random year generator with you in order to protect it from any sort of rage incident when I get a year that I don't know anything about. So I'll let you do the draw.
Yeah.
We'll see which year I am cursed with for the next episode.
And we've jumped forward 10 years to 2001.
That could have been a lot worse. I've got a feeling that some of the shows might be pretty terrible because I don't remember the early 2000s being a great time for comedy. It was later, sort of earlier and then later. But we'll see what debutantes from that year come along, and that episode will be on all your usual platforms on the 1st of December. Now we move on to our comedy legend of the month. And we try not to say the word legend lightly on this show. But it's fair to say, without this lady, I probably wouldn't have got into comedy. There are a few people that are really sort of huge idols of mine. And Victoria Wood is definitely one of those. My parents are huge Victoria Wood fans, and I say are in the present tense, as this is a fandom that will never end. And those that know me know that Victoria Wood was actually born just a few miles away from where I live. So it's very much a local legend as well. And my original hometown actually has a statue of her in the town centre. So what are your sort of memories of the comedy of Victoria Wood?
It's minimal. A lot of it I remember because I'm a big fan of Julie Walters. So if I saw Julie Walters in something, I'd watch it. And a lot of the time it was with Victoria Wood. The Acorn Antique stands out because it was a spoof of one of my programs I used to sit and watch with my mother, Crossroads. So that was Acorn Antiques was a spoof for that. So that always made me chuckle. And what else did I? Oh, the audience with. I'd watch all the audiences with, and that stands out as possibly her best on TV for me. You're probably going to come tell me I'm totally wrong, which is fine. But the audience with I loved, and Dinner Ladies. I did mean to watch them before we done this episode, but unfortunately life got in the way a little bit, and I didn't. But again, dip in and out of things. But no, audience with and anything with Julie Walters was for me.
Anyone who's really followed Victoria Wood's career would know she actually worked extensively with a lot of the same people. Julie Walters being sort of the main one. A little bit of trivia around Wood and Walters, which was in 1981. What actually happened was when that was actually commissioned, a condition that Victoria actually put in was that Julie Walters had to have equal billing. And if she didn't, she wouldn't do the show. So one thing, when you look into sort of like the history of Victoria Wood, her life and things like that, you see that she's very much around sort of giving other people a lot of credit for what they do and stuff. She wasn't one for kind of any sort of ego or spotlight. You should very much sort of shy away from that. But you mentioned The Audience With, and that is actually on BritBox at the moment. So anybody who wants to watch An Audience with Victoria Wood, make sure you get onto BritBox. I believe that our listeners over in the States and Canada can actually get that as well. But I would also recommend it. It is so funny. I didn't watch a great deal of kind of The Audience With things because it was sort of like my younger sort of time. And obviously I've watched it in retrospect as Audience With was, I think, 18, it was late 80s, so about 88, 89 possibly. But I've watched it since and it's so funny. But as I said, Acorn Antiques, hilarious. The whole two soups thing is just so funny. But the highlight for me was Dinner Ladies.
I've dipped in and out. I've had to Mavis and Coronation Street was in it, wasn't she? And
yeah,
her that went on to Maxine Peake.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, again, I've seen bits and pieces, but nothing to write home about, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I've seen every episode multiple times. Dinner Ladies was a bit of an unusual one in that a lot of the humor is very sort of very sort of northern, and it reminded me a lot of people that I'd actually met in my own sort of life. Um, it was sort of 98 to 2000. And that was a sort of era where I was sort of going out into the world of work and things like that. And when you can watch a show and you see people and you think, well, that's like that person, and that's like that person, and that's like that person. It's it's very sort of surreal.
Yeah, she was a great observationist, wasn't she?
Yeah, it was literally like, it was like she'd met the same people that I had. And you've got, the Maxine Peake character Twinkle is just so kind of sarcastic and so funny. And it's little things like, she calls one of the male characters, I can't remember, I think it's possibly it's either Tony or Stan, and I think it's Stan, she calls him League of Gentlemen. It's just things like that. It's just like in a real life situation, nobody else would get it, but it'd be like there'd be somebody there going, just kind of cracking up. But it's such a funny such a funny show, and of course you have like Julie Walters coming in as her mum. I believe her character name is Petula. She comes in and she's just she I think she lives in a caravan on the car park or something. And it's just so funny, and it's, you see all these people that you've seen in other sort of things that she's done, that she's worked with for years and years. So Celia Imrie's in that. She's worked with her for years. Obviously Julie Walters pops in as well, and one of the recurring characters, which I only noticed sort of rewatching it recently, Sue Cleaver from Coronation Street.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So she's in quite an early role for her in this, and you see sort of you're saying, hang on, I've seen her in something before. But so there's some really brilliant guest stars in there. So do you remember a guy called Simon Williams? He was in Upstairs, Downstairs.
If I saw his face, possibly.
Yep. He was also in Don't Wait Up as well. He was one of the guest stars. Joanne Froggatt, she's been in various things. Eric Sykes was one of the guest stars as well. Dame Thora Hird, Linda Barron, and a lady called Jeanette Tuff, aka Wee Jimmy Cranky.
Oh, yes. That's
She
a great
actually
question. The real name of Wee Jimmy Cranky. Yeah.
There's a quiz question if ever it comes up.
Yeah.
But she actually plays. She's one of Petula's friends, and just kind of pops up in one episode. And I remember seeing her and thinking, "Is that who I think it is?" Yep, that is indeed the lady that plays Wee Jimmy Cranky. But I say it's just such a hilarious show. It was one of the best shows of probably the last couple of decades in my eyes, and it's a very subtle humor. It's not something where you have all kinds of massive slapstick violence and things like that. We talked about Bottom, and that's very sort of slapstick and over the top and chaotic, whereas this is more kind of subtle and observational. If anyone who has that sort of humor, you really need to be watching Dinner Ladies. It's a fantastic show. It really
it's probably
is
something that I'd love. And I will watch it before we record the next episode, and as part of the feedback, I will tell you my thoughts on it exactly. And I promise I'll do that. I'll make time.
Brilliant. And I say if anybody does want to watch it, it is on BritBox at the moment. So take a look at that. And that is one of the services that you can actually access from outside the UK, certain countries, without needing to mess around with all this VPN technology and stuff like that. Also on there is Housewife 49, which is a slightly less well-known show that she did for ITV. And then there was Nice Cup of Tea, which I don't remember, and I should do.
That rings a bell. Was that towards the end of her life, or was it sort of a tribute show? Or
they were like one-off. I'm sure this was like one-off episodes. And it was sort of, each episode was based around it was one sort of, not something there's a huge amount of info about sort of anywhere, but it was one of the last things she did. But yeah, there's not a massive amount of stuff about it, which is a shame. But I don't think that's available anywhere. Don't think you can really kind of get hold of that anywhere. But that was the work of Victoria Wood. As I've said, huge part of the kind of comedy influence from my own point of view. So next episode, we're going to have another comedy legend. We'll put on our Twitter page nearer the time who that's going to be. So if you want to take a look at that, or if you want to get in touch with ourselves, the best place to do that is our Twitter page. So that is at Comedy Room Pod. So if you've any particular comedy legends that you want to hear us discuss the work of, or if any sort of feedback about the episodes, then please get in touch, and we may be featuring your choice of legend in a future episode. So that was 1991 and the work of Victoria Wood. So it just remains for us to thank everyone for keeping listening to us, and your downloads and your subscriptions mean a huge amount to us, more than we could ever describe or kind of put into words. So until the 1st of December, which is our next episode, where we'll be leaping in time to 2001, it just remains for us to say, so it's goodbye from me.
It's a good night from me.
And we will see you all on the 1st of December.